Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Hebrews with Brady Randall.
Well, the text we're about to read today is one of the most sobering in all of the scriptures, in my opinion. And this is verse 26 to 31 of Hebrews chapter 10. If we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severely do you think someone deserves to be punished who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, who has treated as an unholy thing the blood of the covenant that sanctified them, and who has insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay." And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Now notice who this text is for. It is for people who have received and heard the knowledge of the truth about Jesus. So this is for church people. This is for people who have heard the story and the good news of what Jesus has done. They have heard how generous God has been towards them, how he's made a way to defeat sin and death, and yet the sober warning is that if we deliberately and willfully continue to sin in a state of sin, then no sacrifice for sins is left. The idea in the Greek language is on a deliberate and habitual sin. This is like the parent telling an older child something that he should know better by now, and yet the child continues willfully and deliberately, hard-heartedly. So in other words, that if you reject the only means of forgiveness, which is Jesus, then there is no plan B. To turn away from the forgiveness of Jesus leaves you and I with no other alternative. Instead, what God says is the only thing we can expect is a fearful expectation of judgment and raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. Now, I shudder to think about that. And I know that's not a pleasant idea, but if it's true, isn't that the most loving thing that God could do to tell you and I before it's too late? And again, this is especially for people maybe who've been around the church, who've heard this message over and over. God's enemies do not win. What they can expect is raging fire and judgment. One of the scariest moments of adulthood for me was when I was burning leaves at my old house. It was a crisp fall day. I wanted to get rid of leaves quickly, so put them in big separate piles and I burned them up, and I'm sure my neighbors were thrilled with it. Love that. Well, the last pile was closer to my house than it should have been. And I lit that pile and it went quickly. It engulfed the pile. The raging fire got high and it got dangerously close to the house. And my heart was racing as the flames engulfed the pile as it headed straight for my house. And I thought my house was going to be a goner. My life flashed before me as I knew it. I thought I could envision the fire company coming out. And so I raced to get buckets of water. And the good news is I spared my house and the embarrassment of the fire company coming over. But just like that, as a result of my poor decision, my house could have been gone. And today God gives that sober reminder to you and to me. How much more severely should those who should have known better, to have heard of how good God is, how gracious he's been, how much more do they deserve to be punished? This is an insult to the Spirit of grace. This is a hard-hearted rebellion. This is a no thanks, stub your nose at God. And yet to us he says, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay." It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. Friends, I don't know how you're hearing this today, if you're in your car, if you're on your computer, if you're on your cell phone, but let's not forget this reality. God is good, but he is not safe. And he means what he says. And today, if you hear this word with a shudder, would you thank God for his grace? Would you know that God has better things in store for you, and yet hear and heed this warning? May you and I be right before God today and thank him for his amazing grace that is still available to you and to me.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus, and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.